This may be one of the most beautiful stories you'll ever hear. Stop scrolling if you believe in loyalty, faith, and redemption. It's the story of Ruth, a woman whose faith and selflessness created ripples in history that touch us even today. Let's dive into it. The story begins in ancient Israel, during a time where judges ruled the land. There was a famine in Bethlehem, and a man named Elimelech decided to take his wife Naomi and their 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, to the country of Moab in search of survival. Moab was a foreign land, a place unfamiliar to Israelites, but survival often means taking risks. Once in Moab, Naomi's sons married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. Everything seemed to be on the mend, but life is full of unforeseen hardships. Tragedy struck. First, Elimelech passed away. Then, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, leaving Naomi, Orpah, and Ruth as widows. Naomi was brokenhearted, and she decided to return to Bethlehem because she had heard that the famine there was over. Here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. Naomi, full of despair, encouraged Orpah and Ruth to remain in Moab. She believed their chances for a better life would be higher if they stayed and remarried in their homeland. Orpah eventually agreed and tearfully said goodbye. But Ruth? Ruth clung to Naomi. She said something so iconic that her words are remembered to this day. "Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried." Pause right there. Imagine that kind of loyalty. Ruth was committing to leave everything familiar and embrace an uncertain future, not out of obligation but out of love for Naomi. This is the kind of loyalty that we can all learn from. And so, Ruth and Naomi journeyed back to Bethlehem together. It was the barley harvest, and Ruth, eager to provide, went to glean in the fields. Gleaning was a practice where the poor were allowed to collect leftover grains after the reapers had finished harvesting. It was hard, humble work, but Ruth was willing to do what it took to care for Naomi. Now enter Boaz, a kind and wealthy landowner and also a relative of Naomi's late husband. Boaz noticed Ruth. Her dedication, her work ethic, and her loyalty to Naomi hadn't gone unnoticed. He asked about her and learned of all she had done. Boaz's heart was moved, and he extended kindness to Ruth. He instructed his workers to leave extra grain for her to gather and reminded her that she'd be safe in his fields. When Ruth shared this kindness with Naomi, Naomi began to see a glimmer of hope. She remembered that Boaz was a kinsman redeemer, a term referring to the cultural practice where a close relative could marry a widow to carry on her deceased husband's family name and property. Naomi instructed Ruth to approach Boaz in humility and courage, to ask for his protection and redemption. Imagine the scene. It was night. Ruth approached a resting Boaz at the threshing floor, a place where grain was processed. She laid at his feet, a gesture of respect and a silent request for his protection. When Boaz awoke and saw Ruth, she spoke boldly yet humbly. She asked him to spread his garment over her, a symbolic way of asking for his care and redemption. Boaz was deeply touched. He admired Ruth's virtuous character, acknowledging that she could have sought younger men but had chosen integrity over impulsive desires. But there was a catch. There was another man in line ahead of Boaz to serve as Ruth's kinsman redeemer. Always an honorable man, Boaz didn't bypass this. He met with the other kinsman and publicly offered him the opportunity to redeem Naomi's land and marry Ruth. When the man declined, Boaz joyfully declared his intentions to redeem both the land and Ruth. Integrity and respect were at the heart of this decision. Soon after, Ruth and Boaz were married. Their union was celebrated not just by them but by the community, and out of their marriage, a son was born, Obed. Here's where it gets even more incredible. Obed would become the grandfather of King David, and from this lineage, Jesus Christ himself would later be born. What a story, right? Ruth, a widowed foreigner with no guarantee of anything, became part of the very lineage that brought redemption to the world. What can we learn from her? The story of Ruth teaches us about loyalty and love. Ruth's commitment to Naomi shows us that love often means putting others above ourselves, stepping into the unknown with faith and selflessness. Her encounter with Boaz shows us the beauty of respect, kindness, and the value of doing what's right even when no one's watching. But this story isn't just about Ruth. It's about God's providence. Even in Naomi's despair, God was orchestrating a plan. Ruth's faith and willingness to step out in courage aligned her with a much bigger purpose. And Boaz's integrity and faithfulness highlight God's kindness reflected through human actions. Imagine living with such faith in a God who can turn mourning into joy, who can redeem the broken parts of our lives in ways we don't expect. Ruth didn't know her choices were setting the stage for a divine plan, but she trusted anyway. So what about you? How can Ruth's story encourage your own journey? Do you see the potential for redemption even in your hardships? My friend, this story is a reminder that nothing in our lives is wasted. When we walk in faith, when we embody loyalty and kindness, we open the door for something extraordinary, something only God can bring. And that's the story of Ruth, a journey of loyalty and redemption. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Let's remember, it's in the smallest acts of faith that the biggest impacts are often made.